the gavel.
I would like to, and I just did. Okay, so have folks taken a look at the minutes yet? Are there any comments on the minutes that anyone needs to make? Folks have, I don't have a copy of them here. I looked at them online. Okay, so motion to approve?
Motion to approve.
All right, and all in favor?
All in favor?
Aye.
Minutes are approved. Okay, so let's do the water level. Greg, you want to kick us off?
Yeah, I'll kick us off on the water level. First of all, when I got back from the holiday, they had brought the severity, the U.S. Drought Monitor moved up to a severe drought warning. So
Okay.
we had been moderate.
For our region. For our region.
For
US
Suffolk
Drought
County.
Monitor
For Suffolk County, yes. The big wells, the big four wells, they dropped in their percentile. They were at 71. At the end of November, they had dropped down to 61. So they're still above the median value, which was the result of having all that rain earlier in the season. The well readings for the months, what we saw was, and what happened is that the numbers were taken on the wells about 4 days after the big, how much was that rainfall? Was that like 4 inches or something at the end of November?
Not that far.
So after the end of that 4, the big four wells didn't react very much to that, but the near shore wells did. The shallower wells, you could see you could see on those that the big four wells all continued to drop.
We're talking about this.
Yeah, well, that's the percentile. If you go to section 4 there, you can see the shallow wells basically gained because 4 days before they took these numbers, we had 4 inches of rain. The deeper wells, that they hadn't achieved any benefit out of that rainfall after the 4 days, and they continued to drain down. So I guess we'll see what happens. The last page on the report shows just the raw values, and you could say, hopefully, we're starting to see the seasonal recharge happening, where the previous 3 or 4 months, there was a definite drop in the big wells. And it's starting to give a little bit of a hook out of where it's starting to slow down its loss. So the bottom line is, and we talked about this, that we leave it guarded at this point. My suspicion is that we may wind up going back to a moderate drought, depending because of the 4-inch rain and this inch rain. So
The US Monitor.
and the U.S. Monitor, sir, yes, that's correct.
And the state report?
I could, the state report is over here. It's on a different. It's not. I did not put that into this report.
Okay.
I put that into a comparison of the
Right.
NRCC versus the New York. And that, I figured, was the point of, that was the drought procedure, which is the next section. So I didn't put that in here. It's in item number, item number 4.
So according to this illustration, the New York State Drought Monitor still has us at watch
That seems to be the case, yes.
as of whenever they took the last reading.
And clearly, we've been in a wetter.
Say again?
Clearly, we're in a wetter.
It looks like the seasonal recharge, knock on wood, that seems to be starting.
Right. Did you want to comment on?
Yes, I can
this
comment on
rainfall?
where we are right now, actually not now. It was added on the 15th, a couple of days ago. And I wrote a note to everybody
Days to
on that
60.
one, that way we had a 3.79 inches, basically months to date, and year to date, it puts us at 47.32, which is a very good number for us, even for a year-end number. But we are going to have some more, as predicted, another half an inch. I put the number in for an average over the past 6 years. So basically, you have that data. We have an average of 45.95 was a 5-year average of year-to-date precipitation, basically. So it's good, you know, from the standpoint of rain. And as you know, it can rain and rain and rain for the rest of the year on Silver Beach and some low-lying areas, and it just runs out. I mean, it will not raise the aquifer a bit. It will stay as it is, as it runs out into the bay. However, in the center, it will help a great deal, basically, the more it rains. So,
Right, and presumably that will lead to, well, not in all areas, but in some areas that will lead to that depletion is replaced.
so anyhow, I think, like right now, for this year, I mean, we're right at this second, we're in good shape from the standpoint of the amount of precipitation that we have this year. Each fall.
Okay. All right, so we have a sense of where we are right at the moment. My concern, if we can sort of start to move to the next item on the agenda, my concern is that we spend too much time thinking about what to do with this data. From my point of view, it should be a little bit more automatic. What happens with our drought levels, how we communicate with the town, based on the criteria that we set up. So, yeah.
No, I think that the criteria we set up I had never anticipated, and I don't think any of us anticipated back in 2018, that you could wind up with 5 months of super rain and then 6 months with hardly any rain. And the criteria, they're not marching in lockstep to each other. They're just random. They're bouncing up above and below.
You're making a point that I think is a general point that we've entered into a more, if you don't want to say global warming anymore, you say climate change, but the point is erratic. More erratic.
It could have been, yeah. Doug made a comment at the last meeting where he said, it seems like we've handcuffed ourselves by having the whole series of criteria, and with the anticipation that they would kind of tell the same story in terms of where our water is. And I think that's the way, you know.
Well, to me, the issue is really, we have very different conditions on the island. We have the near shore areas, which is almost like a different continent, I mean, a whole different place relative to the center. So when you have a criteria and you have a certain kind of a level of warning, it runs into issues with people who have plenty of water in the center, and we would like to conserve it in the near shore areas. And so when we talked about this years ago, it's like, we don't want to have, the idea was we don't want to have multiple levels in different areas of the island. So
Let's say that part of it clearly. I was there, you were there during that period of discussion, and the idea was the same restrictions, the same would apply everywhere to
It
everybody.
was imposed on us in essence. It wasn't our decision necessarily, but it was like what we've heard from our clientele is that they didn't
Our
want,
clientele, meaning the
Our
board, okay.
that they didn't want different basic levels of control.
Right.
Of drought.
And how do we feel about that now? Yeah, and
So no set of rules is going to be perfect.
right,
There's always going to be interpretation of data
right.
against the criteria and a judgment that has to be made.
Complexity of data, complexity of how it applies.
I don't think that we should shy away from that complexity or try to simplify it up front. I think the essence of a body like this is, it takes in the data and makes the best decision it can
Provide.
as it goes along. That's the way any corporate board would work. So I'm not worried about the amount of time we take to actually interpret complicated data and figure out what we ought to do. One. Two, I think it becomes really hard, practically speaking, to have different levels of drought in different parts of, and different rules around conservation and so forth in different parts of the island.
I think that was the original logic.
And I agree with that. I think it's just impossible to administer, and it invites all kinds of discussion. You know, that's your problem, that's not my problem. And fact is, we're one community, we're one island, and we ought to do the best we can with the data we've got and make decisions.
Let's just, I mean, are we all kind of still at that place? I mean,
It was terrible. I mean, people were really against, you know,
it was divisive.
Yeah, it was very divisive. And it was like, we had problems in the Silver Beach area, but in the center plenty, and you get people say, you know, don't tell me I can't do what I want to with my water. I got plenty of it under me. Thank you very much. As opposed to Silver Beach, possibly, where it said, be careful.
Right. I mean, I think that the behavior of people who are impacted is likely to be more adaptable than the behavior of people who are not impacted.
Oh.
So is there a way of
So-
keeping the general drought status island-wide in one category, but then sort of breaking it down so different parts of the island can address it in there? Like you post the sign,
Yeah, basically.
and I
just
don't
like
know,
we
is
did
that
with the-
effective?
with-
Does that do anything?
With various organizations, homeowners organizations. It's their prerogative, in my mind, if they wanted to change and put a warning for Silver Beach in and not have anything involved in this.
And there are reasons to behave differently in
Don't
those
water your
areas.
yard, or don't fill your pool, or be careful.
So there might be some sort of a hybridization
I think so.
of the two approaches. That is, you have a single, hey Doug, welcome. We're talking about something near and dear to your heart, which is the drought levels. And we're just discussing our drought.
Oh, yeah.
level advisory.
Okay.
So if you take a moment, get your coat off, shake off the.
Park over in the American Legion parking lot.
Yeah, something else going on, I guess.
Guess so.
Because I don't think it's correct for us to just overlook the fact that there are parts of the island where there
They're
is.
sensitive.
We know where the lens is very thin. You know, we've got huge, deep lens here, but maybe Silver Beach,
Yeah.
it's a whole different,
You know, 20 feet under there. I mean, it's a huge difference. Yeah.
it is a huge difference.
So
It's peninsula.
not to make the discussion more complicated, but I think it needs to be more complicated before it gets simpler. There's also big differences in when we ask for change in behavior, or we're talking to people about, we're in a drought situation, change your behavior in some way, in the winter versus in the summer. In this heavy season of use and in the very, when there aren't many people here. So there's a higher level of sensitivity to what's going on during the April through November season. And we may want to, all right, so we have that dimension. We have the dimension that things are that the data itself is complicated. We have the dimension that the data, it has become more erratic than it used to be. We have the dimension of, we want to bring everybody into a sort of single framework, but if you're in sensitive areas, you may be more inclined to change behavior. Your community may be more inclined to encourage changes of behavior and to spread the word. There may actually be reasons more to change behavior more in those areas. That doesn't mean that we can't have a single drought advisory level that reflects that this drought advisory level means in the nearshore areas, be very, don't use your irrigation systems, or whatever it is, whatever we're deciding.
Can I go back to just the
Yeah,
question that I
sure.
asked in the last, you too? Does your sign that you put up, does it have an effect? Do people give you feedback? Do you find that it's efficacious at all.
I think it raises awareness. It doesn't promulgate any practices. I think people lose sight unless it's self-evident, as it was during September and October, where it didn't rain for 2 whole months. And when we talk about these advisory levels, and we say, voluntary reductions in water usage with some mandatory requirements, I mean, how in the world do you measure that? We don't have any tools with which to measure water consumption.
Anyway,
No, sir.
Well, we do.
Some places.
you do, right.
Yes, West Neck Water District,
Where you do. Some sort of a system.
Deering Harbor,
where you have meters. Yes, but obviously, most of the island does not have that information. I'm simply saying, knowing what we know now, I think part of the conversation today about these criteria is taking what we learned in September and October, where these criteria didn't serve us very well. How do we recalibrate them so that it will serve us well the next time that happens?
Well, part of the reason you were frustrated because it seemed like we couldn't come to a decision to raise the drought level.
Very much so.
So, okay, so again, to sort of keep this conversation, the parts of this conversation all running together, yet another level of complexity that we're dealing with is we have a federal, a state, and a Shelter Island drought level. And
Yeah, and I have another thought about that, which is, do we not also have guidance from the county?
Not that I'm aware of.
we have
I don't think-
guidance on the federal level that, for the county, and on the state level for the county, right? Both the state and the federal reports
Apply to that.
are applying
the
to
county.
Suffolk County.
I would prefer to use something that was more local than something that was statewide. I just think that with statewide, it's a very blunt,
Right, but the state is giving us Suffolk County.
okay.
The federal government is giving us Suffolk County.
Yes, as a matter of fact, part of Suffolk County, there have been times where the North Fork is, say, in a moderate drought, and the South Fork is in a severe drought. I mean, that, the federal version really
Doesn't
breaks
break down
things
Shelter Island, but it does
brings
break down.
brings out, irregardless of county lines or state lines or anything like that, the county, or I should say the state, they have 8 districts, and they have the counties bundled into these districts, and I can put this up if we want.
Greg, your report that you have right underneath your hands, what color are we right now? We're orange, are we not?
We're severe drought number 2, yes.
Right, severe drought, state levels. And do we have any kind of restrictions on water usage? Not really.
wait, I'm confused. The New York State Department of the part of the package, the DEC, current drought conditions, puts us at a watch. So are we talking about another? This one?
Yes, that's
yellow?
the state, and the other one is the federal version.
Okay, so the state says that we are still on a watch.
Yet,
And where is the federal? I don't.
The previous.
Federal says
previous-
that's Greg's map.
That's in the report.
that's,
And-
okay, we're in a moderate drought according to the
No, it's a severe drought.
US.
I'm not sure what date, that,
This is what you said.
okay.
I know you probably can't see it, but it's what you gave us. So this was December 10th. And my eyes are not great, but this is severe drought.
That's my point.
Okay. Whereas New York State says we are in a moderate. We're in a watch.
Don't we use this information kind of for ourselves in discussion?
Well, we have,
In essence-
we've been using the state and federal levels as one factor
Right.
among
Among others,
others.
exactly.
The others being our well reports.
That is exactly correct.
And we present this to the board,
And sorry?
and it goes to the board where they're the ones that make the final decision as to level.
But in theory, we should be able to make a recommendation, and we should be able to make a recommendation without spending an hour of our time at figuring out what the recommendation
Right.
is.
I think you're exactly correct, and I think
the goal here, right?
that was the flaw in, as I was saying, is that
I was surprised that we hadn't quite gotten to that. I thought we were kind of at that. We said, well, if the levels are 25% or 50% or whatever, and the state is saying this, we are
it's
this.
the and part that gets you. Because what we you're looking at, that the federals are saying it's a severe drought. The state is saying that it is a watch, right? So then our well levels were saying something totally different, the 71%. You know, we were above the median with the big well.
Right.
So what we need to do, I think, is set this thing up where we take a look at all of the criteria that we would quote unquote measure
For ourselves.
And we would sit down and take a look and say, okay, we've got 4 criteria here, our wells, what the US Drought Monitor has. You know, maybe do we do this, drop the state in there as well and say, okay, boots on the ground, what do we see, you know, what do we see in terms of our recognition?
The point is, it doesn't really matter what the report says or what the colors are on the map. You can look out the window and you can say, we're in a drought. And we should recommend to the town board, this is a problem.
And not try and which is,
Average it all out.
not trying to make it a formulaic.
Right.
Okay, it's 12.7 because of all those things, and therefore it's that. We should just look at the different criteria and say, you know what? We haven't had any rain in 2 months, in 3 months, and everything is dying.
By that approach because of the intrinsic subjectivity of it. Andrew?
Okay. So there is no issue in business that is more fraught with emotion and controversy than compensation. And every compensation committee I've ever been on always says at the end, it's the final judgment of the committee. So here are all the factors you consider, but it's the committee's judgment in the end. And so I'm with Greg on this, which is, let's list the inputs, the things that we will consider, and then leave it to the judgment, the collective judgment of the committee as to what the final decision is going to be. Because I don't think we can never, ever anticipate all the different permutations and ins and outs and conclude what we're going to do based on each one of those permutations. I think that
You know what?
strikes me as impossible.
And it proved to be impossible that this.
And it's pretty difficult, but again, I'm not sure I'm with you yet on this. I mean, I'm open. Let's have a conversation.
Well, is there other communities and other areas, like I'm thinking, for example, I hate to mention it, but I am, Suffolk County Water Authority, they send out advisories to their customers. Okay, when we're in a drought. So where do they get their information from? State? You know, I mean, all I'm saying, it's a rhetorical question. I will find out where they get their information from. But what about other communities like the South Fork, South Hole, Riverhead? Do they have the same type of warning that the town is concerned about, Joe? No?
Yeah, Suffolk County Water Authority is sending out their communications based on their production capabilities. They're monitoring their outputs, their ability to meet demand. They're not reacting to a state or federal, advisory. They may share that information, but their reaction and their jurisdiction is only limited to what they can produce.
Kind of like us looking at our wells.
Yeah, but this is how our policy is now. It looks at the 4 or 3 factors, and then we're able to make our own conclusion at the end. So I'm not really sure this discussion is really leading to any change in policy that we already have. I know that the criteria for our well monitoring is perhaps a standard lower than we had imagined it would be. It is what, 30% or 25% of the median is what we consider to be.
Of breaking into, that the level suggesting where we should take some actions in terms of.
Right, but
The corrective actions.
But this scenario that was just described, where we're at 70% of the median, but it hasn't rained for 2 months, well, you're in a drought, but you don't have a water supply issue, at least in the center of the island. So I think we should expand our discussion beyond what these arbitrary levels are, because it's really a discussion about what is the change we're trying to impart. We don't really have a lot of tools to stop water consumption. We don't allow irrigation in a widespread fashion on the island. We don't allow irrigation really at all. There's a handful of grandfathered systems that are groundwater-based irrigation, but for the most part, that's insignificant in terms of an island-wide impact. All of our water use, for the exception of new plantings, is domestic use, which doesn't get removed from the system. It's a closed loop system. You suck up water for your house, it goes back out to your septic system, so you're changing the quality, but you're not changing the drought conditions by reducing your domestic water use. You certainly have the opportunity to reduce your own, upconing risk or saltwater intrusion. But I think we have to take this policy discussion one step further and have a more robust conversation about what change we're trying to drive here. These levels don't really impact our ability to conserve water. We have very few tools available to us that preserve water, and the scale with which we do, for instance, the restriction of stopping people from washing cars is really more of a
Psychological.
yes, that's not going to change our aquifer
behavior.
conditions if the 6 people that would normally wash their car on Saturday don't do that in July. So, we're starting to step beyond the scientific aspect of this. I think we have to have a more pragmatic conversation about what are we trying to accomplish in the end here. This is set up already to be both, this policy is already set up to be both a quantifying approach and a qualitative approach. It has hard metrics in it, and it has the ability for us to change the level
And it also gives you the ability to make a judgment call in between periods.
between periods.
Right.
Yes. And my hesitation historically has always been, what is it that this is going, other than the messaging, which is helpful, what change is this going to impart on the community by sending out this
Let's take a moment there. The messaging is helpful because,
It's a message,
It's an awareness.
it's awareness.
It's bringing an
We're
awareness.
trying
of
to
some
impact
sort.
behavior.
Yeah.
well, are we? Is there
Well,
behavior that we can?
Well, I guess that's something I'd really put forth. I mean, what,
You have conscientious people that are going to read it and they're going to act, but that's not 100% of your population. And you have another part of the
Well,
population
in
that is
what-
going to read it and that's
Hope
it.
for the best.
Hope
But
for the best.
in what way are they going to act? So would Joe?
Environmentally conscious, say, residents, they're going to think about it. Am I going to wash my car? No, I
Well,
don't
okay,
think so.
washing your car, but again, we're
Or-
saying the impact there is.
I'm going to limit my children's shower to 3 minutes. Okay, so there's
Limiting
different.
showers, that's a possibility, a little bit on, but again, Joe is making the point that that's a closed loop system. That water that you put in, that you shower with, goes right back into the
sorts.
ground.
those things help.
Man, of sorts. The reality is what we're trying to do is people that have the private wells, which are everywhere, basically, is prevent them from salting their wells. At least that's the assumption that I have in the Silver Beach area. In the center, if you have a deep well, you're probably not going to run out of water, okay?
No, we're quite aware that there's a difference.
So
there.
the reality is, where you need to warn somebody to say, be careful, it's because it's your own water usage. It's you that could be hurting yourself and your own well.
But what I heard out of what Joe was saying was the potential for salting and upcoming.
That's it.
I would say from reviewing reports of upconing or salted wells of the past few dry periods,
Right.
almost exclusively, it appears to be the result of an inadvertent overuse of water. Somebody was away and they left
pipe broke or
Exactly.
Yeah, the pool refill function.
Pool refill broke, somebody left their drip line on and the well ran for
Right.
48 hours. That's usually what's causing these isolated cases, not every case, and I'm not privy to every single instance, but the ones that I have examined, that typically is the case. So, from my perspective, that's perhaps where our messaging can be the most effective is an opportunity to remind people to be more aware of their water consumption. But I think we have, as a committee, to understand that our ability to actually stop water consumption is pretty difficult.
Right, but still, the criteria that we have failed us this summer because we looked, in other words, every time we sit down at a committee meeting, it's a point in time measurement. And we get the point in time measurements from the wells, et cetera, we say, wow, dodged another bullet. We don't have a metric in these series of criteria that looks at trends, that says, well, we had great rain in August, then no rain in September, and no rain in October, and no rain for the first half of November. To me, that was a change over time, and it wasn't captured in these criteria. And therefore, we never got to the point of raising the drought level, warnings, et cetera, unless you were in a vulnerable community and you took it upon yourselves to put up a sign to try and raise consciousness so that people at least have been notified in a very public way that, perhaps overconsumption of water, inadvertent as it may be, could have a deleterious impact on your own well.
What do you feel was the risk during that period that was unmitigated by not changing this status?
Well, I think if we had gone to, warning, we never even went to warning.
But what would that accomplish? I'm saying in hindsight, given those conditions, what do you think the community would have
I
benefited?
think a message from the town government about that would prompt more discussion and more awareness that there's an issue.
So you agree then it's not really about the specific restrictions, it's more about the.
Well, I wish it
messaging.
was. I wish it was. I wish there was a tangible way to enforce these guidelines, but we really don't have the tools at our disposal.
Well, again, that is the question, and I'm wondering. So there's another thing that one can do is just not water your plants, whatever, not water.
Of course,
We're gonna come up with that with the
and
irrigation.
that's Shelter Island.
Right.
I mean, if you think you're going to have a sod lawn and you're going to irrigate to keep it nice and green, well, you probably shouldn't be living here.
Sprinkling and all that, those are behaviors that
Right.
would.
Or move to Daring Harbor.
Those are behaviors that could
I
be.
did not say that, Greg.
Well, I guess that's what maybe I'm trying to move the conversation away from this ranking of our levels.
Yeah.
Right.
Because that seems to be in a pretty good place. We perhaps didn't act in a way that we all wanted to.
And Doug is also making a comment that we haven't got a criteria in here that says trend, 2 months, 3 months with, in a particular condition.
Knowing what we know, what we experienced recently, we should.
And also given what Greg started with, which was this idea of more erratic rainfall and.
But we haven't had an issue.
But
I think maybe 1 or 2 people went out of water or something like that I know of during this period of time. There hasn't been an outcry.
Yeah, but I in Silver Beach, I get a lot of complaints from neighbors about other neighbors.
Neighbor is watering.
Using 2 sprinklers, watering in the middle of the day, et cetera, et cetera. And this is completely, I'm not trolling for this stuff. This is unsolicited.
Let's ask the question. And is that a problem, that people are watering in the middle of the day?
Oh, yes.
In these
I don't know, but anecdotally, I can tell you that it happens.
And people are concerned with
It hasn't been raining, and it's happening because it hasn't been raining.
Of course,
that they're doing it more, right?
course.
Things are dry.
water consumption goes up during drought
Yeah,
periods.
they go, oh gee, my lawn's getting brown. Instead of accepting that it's a natural part of the summer cycle and that it will get green in September.
I mean, you drive around the island and you can see who cares about the drought? And who doesn't?
Absolutely.
It's just- But also, I'd just like to say that
We're gonna come.
we're gonna
right,
come
right.
across this in this
Right.
irrigation policy brief that the building department is working on, because irrigation is a big part of this, water consumption in this town, during drought.
All these things are related. Andrew, you wanted to say something, you're gonna,
I don't think we should beat ourselves up too much,
okay.
because we had a robust discussion,
Mm-hmm.
which is what we're supposed to have. You looked at the criteria, you made the point, hey, the criteria aren't capturing everything. We didn't move the drought level, but it also started raining. If we were still in the situation that we were in then, we would be having a very different discussion, and you might have acted in between the meetings, and you had the authority to act in between the meetings. So maybe we should have we should identify the need to look at trends and so forth, but I'm still comfortable with leaving the judgment based on a series of inputs to this consensus, to this
The
discussion.
way it is.
All right, so then what we found was that two meetings ago, when we were sort of still in thinking we might be in a drought period, the issue was not water consumption issues, it was fire issues. So.
That was the threat.
Right, so the recommendations, the awareness that we're trying to drive is different in one situation and in another situation. So I think that maybe it's just our learning curve, and if we're all going to stay with this water advisory committee thing, we learned that there's certain times we're calling for a sign in the center that says conserve water, and there's certain times we're calling for a sign at the firehouse saying, be mindful of dry
risk of
conditions,
fire.
high risk of fire.
Right, which is why I think the conversation should be about our objective here. What are we trying to accomplish? Because these other monitors are things like soil moisture. We're looking at well readings, that's effectively our reservoir. But like the water company, for instance, doesn't tell you to conserve water when the reservoir is full. It could be dry for 6 months, but if the reservoir is full, there's no water conservation.
Right.
But we're in a
For 2 or 3 months or 4 months after a lot of water, which is exactly what we had, left us with average or better than average conditions.
But we did have a different problem where the vegetation was very dry and we had a high risk of fire, and we didn't have any mechanism in here to address that but maybe that's not the place where it should be addressed. Maybe if this is a drought policy, it should be about water conservation. And there's other mechanisms and tools to address the fire risk, for instance. That came from the state level. There were no burn policies put in place. And, that's the discussion I think we need to have. Focus on what are we trying to accomplish here? What is the objective of the drought policy? Is it about water conservation? Is it about the social messaging? Is it about the fire risk? I don't think that it should be. I think the drought policy is about water conservation. It should be geared towards water conservation. If you have a lot of water around and access, then you're not really in a position to restrict people on their water usage. If you have a fire problem, then that can be dealt with. There should be a wildfire policy.
Shouldn't it be all of these things?
Yeah, I would encourage us to be thinking holistically.
Yeah.
Look, the 7 of us we've been doing this for a while together. And we should be getting smarter together and faster together in looking at, we've looked. So I'm good with it being holistic as long as we're all ready to say, we've had these discussions, we've had these situations before. We kind of know low aquifer, we know when we have low aquifer, and we know when we have 2, 3, 4, and we're in a trend. And now we want to pull out the stops in terms of communication.
Can I ask
Communication in the correct direction. Yeah, go ahead.
a question? We talked about bringing all of this different criteria and the local criteria, and then reworking it to present to the town or to the public. And so my question is, what is that process? Do we as a committee take all this individual information every month and look at it? How is this actually going to work?
I would think that it might
Are you
be,
doing it right?
Greg has been our point person.
Yeah, I think that, not done, again, as I mentioned to Doug, last meeting, you mentioned that you felt that we were handcuffed because some aspects of the criteria were fine. You know, the center well levels were good, but it was 2.5 months, and everything is dry as hell. I don't feel that we put together in, and I should look back and find out. But yeah, I don't think we set the process that we were going to communicate this to the town board with a recommendation effectively. I don't think that we did that as well as we could have.
So is that something you'd want to revisit
Oh, absolutely.
and then come back to us with it, or we'd revisit it?
Depends on how you want to do, you know.
Well, I guess I want to accomplish two things. The two things. One is I want to a little bit simplify. We should be able to look at what we have, and you should be able to make some sort of a recommendation to us about where we are. And you have been doing that, to your credit. You should also be able to explain, like I would like to take Doug and you and put you together and have it so that Doug could do what you do.
Happy to support you, Greg.
All right, very good.
Because we want to be able, it shouldn't just be relying on you. It should be, right, that we have and that will help you with what's the process I put this together.
Yeah.
The other thing that I want to, before we let go of this conversation. Well, yeah, Ken has been part of, yeah, I mean, I kind of like Ken up here saying like, okay, and here's the rainfall that we're seeing. Right, and contributing that piece of it.
You know, it'd be helpful, I think, to have
The three of you
yeah.
working together on
Yes.
process. All right, the second thing is that there was some effort, discussion of simplification, that is not having our levels be different than the state levels, using the state levels themselves.
The terminology.
You know,
Technology, yes.
I sent something out on Friday. I don't know how many people, you
Yeah.
know, that
I even looked at your animation,
I haven't.
that was not my animation.
their animation.
Yeah, you know,
That was very informative, that.
that was, how many of, did anybody go into the YouTube and look at the?
Yeah.
That was, that
It was
was,
simple but informative.
Exactly right.
And it talked about a confluence of evidence, a convergence of evidence.
Yeah.
So it is that we're needing to pull together everything that we're seeing and then use intelligence. We're the ChatGPT of this, right? So we're summarizing.
you know, in comparison, the debt, the federal versus the state, report frequency, the federal every week on a Thursday, bang, comes out. The New York monthly, although more frequently during times of drought. The report that they issue doesn't have a date on it. So you're not really knowing.
This is from the state, Greg?
Yeah, the state thing doesn't have a date on it. The federal, it's got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 levels. The state has 5.
Right, so you're comparing the two. Is there one that you feel is a better one to be?
If you go into the New York one, their recommendation is to go to the NRCC. This is the data that they're using. So it's almost like if they're taking the NRCC data and then coming back and saying, okay, here's the state number 2 weeks later, 3 weeks later, whatever
You're
it
saying
may
that
be.
we're better off with the national?
I think we're better with the national, yes, because it's you know, the way that the state bundles together 12 counties, and those 12 counties are all, you know, of those five levels, and that they're all
So it's
that.
actually more granular when you use the federal.
Exactly so. As I say, the feds, you know, have had, the North Fork is at one level and the South Fork's on the other, based on these 9 criteria, which probably was soil moisture and agriculture, I would imagine.
But there's a strong argument that says if the North and the South Forks are at a certain level, we should be at that level.
But if
Yeah,
they're at a
looking at our
different
well.
level,
If they're
they're at
different,
different
yeah.
levels, then
I'm not sure I agree with you,
On which,
because they have the luxury of a vastly larger aquifer to draw as the water source versus Shelter Island.
So that combined with, well, we're saying we're gonna use our intelligence together, our collective intelligence, which means that we have those, you start from the federal level, and then you look at, oh, but is our aquifer showing something different? And then we make a judgment call. No? And you look at the trends and.
Yeah,
Judgment.
I think you have to look at the trends, really, is really important.
Acknowledge which is part of why I'm trying to bring you into this committee work.
We have something, we have something to
Okay,
resolve.
so let me just ask the question, just terminology wise, it's a simple thing. Could we simplify things by just going to the federal terminology?
I believe that you could.
I mean, I
think
think
that
that this-
trying to say both of them is,
The state is more, it's, I don't want to use the word alarmist, but it's more colloquial. I'm looking at emergency, so there's a connotation of an emergency situation, whereas when I look at the federal, extreme drought, well, what does that really mean? So I think maybe some of the terminology that the state is using has to do with just being more accessible to the public. You know, I mean, we're in a disaster. Even the state, the last level, extreme or exceptional drought federally, is drought disaster. So I'm just saying that the language they use is more accessible to you and I. And we have this sense of what an emergency is. We have a sense of what a disaster is. Whereas the NRCC, extreme drought, exceptional drought, it doesn't bring that same understanding to the language. Do you see what I'm saying?
yeah, I might put a parentheses mark and AKA drought disaster, close, and that way you've got them both, but you're using the D0, 1, 2, 3, 4 as your, that's the units that you're working with, and then you just title them slightly different with a parentheses.
Federal units
Yeah, yeah.
with
And
language.
just parentheses, it's also known as that, also known as drought emergency.
Can we be that granular, though, with the restriction? To me, this is, simpler is better. In other words, just to have a fewer number of levels that we can define more precisely as opposed to 6 levels. What's the difference between what you do between level 5 and 6? Or 3 and 4?
Right.
Or, I'm just saying,
I get that
too
it's too
fussy,
fussy.
basically, yeah. Simplicity, keep it simple.
Okay,
I think the governor would establish the drought disaster as well, so I don't,
so, okay,
my memory
well, so
anyway.
again, just trying to understand, is it then that we just don't need to, we're good, we've got what we want already in the Shelter Island levels?
I like 5.
But and are we unhappy? We were unhappy, Doug, you were saying.
I think we need to add a criteria. I think we need to add a trend metric in here.
Trend,
A
3 months of
a
level.
measurement device that takes into consideration a trend in rainfall.
For how long have we been at this
yeah, well,
level?
they have a 3-month forecast in the federals put together a 3-month, for a 1 month and a 3-month, 1 week or something.
Okay, so
So if you wanted to say
I'm talking
what,
about a look back, look back 3 months to say, this is what the trend was. Because the forecast really doesn't matter because it's a forecast. I mean, this is what they think, but that's not necessarily what's going to happen. But as we saw this past fall, it was self-evident that we had a drought. And had we added another metric, we might have come up with a recommendation for a higher level of.
Yeah, you were looking to be
Warning.
able to fine tune, you were looking at you weren't.
It just seemed to me that, all of our
We were in an area
criteria were
of
blunt.
concern.
And
We couldn't convey concern because it didn't match our.
it didn't fall into a basket.
And it's not based on that we weren't at a certain percentage with our wells, it's based on that we were in a trend.
well, we have,
There's a cumulative effect, isn't there?
I think though, we do have that now for the well heights. If you think the last section in the monthly report, that shows you what those 4 wells are doing, and you can look back for 5 years, I guess, on it now. And then the second is the percentile ranking of how it compares to history. We just said it was 71 and now it's 61. You know, so if you take a look at the monthly
That's just the
report,
big four wells.
that's exactly right.
So those are where again?
The center.
Yeah, they're the deepest
So
area.
where the thickest aquifer is. So they don't take into consideration the peninsula communities,
That would be true.
which are much more vulnerable to quantity issues in the aquifer.
Much more vulnerable for.
Yeah, much more variable too, because.
So I would respectfully suggest that we need to add monitoring points in those communities to the big four to more accurately measure the entire health of the aquifer.
To me, it's questionable also that the big four really do push anything out to the edges except to the main part of the island.
Right,
They certainly don't
not
push
gonna go to
anything
the
out to
peninsula,
Silver Beach.
because you're coming around a peninsula.
Big Ram is on its own.
Right.
Big Ram, Little Ram are not getting pushed to the
All right,
east.
no, we can talk about that.
All right, so
I
you guys
also-
are gonna work.
I understand what you're
One more monitoring well that's out there that we can get the data from, that's in Silver Beach, near the point of the peninsula.
Yeah, right.
We need to add that.
Middle.
And I would like, clarity of the correspondence, just make a document that makes it really clear what, because we've done this already, what recommendations are associated with what levels. Right?
Yeah.
Refine the levels, add a,
It'll be several iterations.
okay.
Silver
But
Beach-
Come back to us with a
That's
presentation.
a good recommendation on Silver Beach because it's down much farther south. In other words, down to the center.
It's on North Silver Beach Road.
That's right in the tech.
That's not monitored here.
That's right. It's just.
It is monitored.
It is? Which one is it?
It's not on the list.
Not on,
But
no,
it's
it's not
monitored. So
monitored.
why
What are
is
you
it
talking, the
not?
one at the very at the point?
At North Silver Beach Road.
It's not monitored.
If it's well,
It is
it
monitored.
is, yeah, we have the numbers, but.
Oh, we have numbers.
It's so,
It's a hole.
It's a borehole. It's continuously monitored.
Oh, that's new.
yeah. It didn't used to be, the last 3 months or so.
Go down there, you'll see
Oh, they
it.
put a new pipe in.
They collared that borehole.
New in it. So they put a monitor in
You're
there.
saying you would like to see one more well?
I know that.
That's the one I
I
want.
didn't know that. Okay, that's
Okay,
great.
so just,
I
is
saw it on
that
the-
going to come up is that a USGS monitor? as
Yes.
well?
Yes,
So
you
is that
know.
eventually going,
Can
To
we
go
add it
online.
into?
It is online.
Look at, yeah, but we'll look at what it
There should
looks
be
like.
another one on the
I don't know what to tell you. It's not-
it's not on our line here.
So your committee is going to come back to us with a recommendation.
Yes.
for Minor revisions to the criteria, meaning addition of a trend concept.
Yep.
And possibly a recommendation to add one more well.
Well, you know what, we'll see, let's.
Take a look, have a
let's see what the other-
conversation,
That's a
come back to
no-brainer.
us.
When there is a strong tidal influence, it kind of gets mushy, but let's see what it looks like.
I don't think so.
We'll see what it looks
I
like.
can't.
We'll find out, won't we?
Yeah.
Because it's continuously monitored, which means
That
it's time series.
It's a data logger.
To high and low tide.
It's where they moved one of the data
They
logs.
moved from the data loggers
Yeah.
there. All right, well, let's take a look at
It's
it.
good. It'll be
Okay.
very good. Be
Okay.
Interesting to see.
Well, it would be, especially as we start to focus on the nearshore peninsula areas and
Very good.
people's wells are getting salted. All right, I'd like to, go ahead if.
So my only request of this subcommittee
Right.
is try and resist the temptation to turn this into an algorithm. In other words, leave the committee the ability to exercise its judgment and identify this as an input. We use the word criterion. Criterion is quite specific. It's on and off. If it's this, then that. Input is a factor to be considered. So I would, again, I don't want to turn this into an algorithm because I think there are always going to be circumstances that we don't anticipate.
But I think you can hybridize and you can say, there's a sort of an algorithm that says, technically we're here, but now we need to have a discussion.
Okay, I'm fine with that.
So we have both inputs and also a little bit of like efficiency in what we're doing.
Yes, I saw that it was being, giving numbers now.
Got it handy.
Oh, yeah.
Handy monitor.
A new pipe.
All right, so we can move along? Yes, everybody's okay with moving? So the next item should be quick. I believe our mission statement was approved by the board? Yes, Amber, Meg?
Yep.
Mission statement comes back to us as approved?
All right.
Means that we need to start to follow that as a process. Yes.
Now we have to do the work.
Yes, now we have to do
Now the hard part.
And the work has to eventually lead to a recommendation. In all cases, it leads to we're action oriented. We're going to recommend something. So, but, we're going to do the studies, we're going to do look at the data. All right, so if, I put it on the agenda just because it was important that we all note that it's a milestone.
One more question
yeah,
relative
yeah.
to that. Is that in its approved state, final state, is that up on our webpage?
Good question, actually.
So
good question.
we
Probably
probably
could be put there.
you wanna
Jessica,
put it
can we,
up there.
yeah, can we get the mission statement up on the, yeah, it absolutely should be there. Good point. Anything else on the mission, the newly approved mission? For, again, mission with respect to potable water. Okay. So then the next item was indexing of studies, and I would like to, could I get share screen, Jessica?
I don't see, there's no hands up, right? I don't.
No hands up, but if anybody, wants to raise your hands, everybody, if I'm not noticing that there's a hand up, let me know. Allow me to know. So am I gonna get a notification?
Okay, yeah,
I should have it already.
yeah, you should be good for that.
Okay, so now but I have to be on the Zoom, to even deal with that, so let me do that. So Water Advisory Committee, let's quickly go there. And Water Advisory Committee. Zoom meeting. And you should let me in. So Ken and I met last week, and I've been doing some work partly based on a suggestion that Ken made. So we were tasked with indexing our existing studies. Sure. I'm going to move to our SharePoint, which should be here. Yes?
Yep.
Yeah, it's coming up.
Yep.
Oh, good. There we are. So if you go to studies, and not everything that's a study is in studies, but most of our, the major studies are all here. And Ken had done some great work earlier on, just trying to name the studies such that they would come up toward the top if they were important or major studies. So he started with a 1 and a 2 and a 3 right now. You can see that 10 and 11 are alphabetized, not, but 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So he gave me and he also had begun a document that was an index. So I've taken that and turned it into a
PDF.
well, it's not a PDF. This is a Google spreadsheet. And there were a number of different reasons I wanted to turn it into a Google spreadsheet, but among them was that we would be able to search through it. So I did the beginning, this is all the beginnings of something, but I took the title of our major study, I took the author, I took the year of the major study, if it had an index or a document description, like it is the recommended, you have to sometimes make a column wider to see everything in it, but what somebody had, there was a study on saltwater intrusion and global warming that was somebody's master's project that was in our studies. So there's a very brief index or document description. I created a pull down of some of the major topics so that we could get a major topic.
Do those link to the
Definition.
report itself if you click in the pull down?
Yeah, if you click on the pull down, you can pick, this is irrigation.
Take you right there.
Yeah.
Awesome.
So, and in fact, you can, if you want, you can filter the column by certain conditions like values, hydrogeology, and I should be able to get that.
Is this on the WAC?
It's in studies in the
You
WAC,
need permission to get in it.
but do you not get in? I will try to share it.
I'm just saying, I tried to get in.
You haven't been able to get in?
I have this basically
You're in studies, and if you click on
I go into
WAC
this
studies.
guy
So what are the other columns, Peter?
Well, okay, so I'll skip this column for a moment, and the last column is the URL of the original study. So if you just click on any one of these, you'll be.
You go to the document.
You're at the document itself. You're at the study. The most interesting, and this is based on a suggestion from Ken, is that I put the ChatGPT will now take a PDF and will summarize it in various ways.
Right.
I created a standard prompt for ChatGPT, and the standard prompt specifically was summarize the key findings and recommendations in this PDF. And so it created and when I click on any one of the cells, like if I look at this geological conditions in town of Shelter Island, key findings are fresh groundwater is sourced entirely from precipitation, blah, blah, blah. Recommendations around pumping management, monitoring and testing.
Oh, I see. That's column F.
This is column F and clicking in. And what this does partly is to take out it's sort of an objective
Yeah,
set
right.
of
It's
key
not
findings.
you and Ken
It's not
saying.
me, it's
Yeah.
not an opinion, so for example, if we look at the USGS's.
God forbid.
God forbid we were to give our opinions,
God
right.
forbid.
However, this is not our opinion. My hope is that we'll have another column where our opinions are
So
more
it's the
welcome.
robot's opinion.
It's ChatGPT's opinion. But so, for example, when I put in the.
Well, that makes it all kosher.
It at least makes
There's no bias.
makes it neutral in terms of its.
Allegedly.
Equal.
It's whatever whatever OpenAI's bias environmentally or.
Oh, you know.
Our latest
Ideologically.
edition, however.
Here we go.
So this is, yes, I'm using the latest edition.
Invented your own.
So it's interesting, putting in the USGS 2016 to 2018, their presentation.
Would you
of the
click on
study.
it so we see what it
Absolutely.
says?
So the key findings, baseline groundwater conditions. Groundwater across Shelter Island shows anthropogenic influences, particularly elevated nitrogen levels in pharmaceutical detections. Nitrate concentrations exceed 5 milligrams at 8 of the 15 sampled sites, indicating potential water quality concerns.
What are we looking at?
We are now looking, oh,
We
is it off?
cannot see what you're
It's a
reading.
study.
Let
but it's a
me,
chat.
why is it that that's
It's not-
coming off the bottom?
I don't
It's
know.
not loading.
Yeah.
It's, your area is frozen there, so,
The screen is not?
Yeah,
No.
it's not sharing.
no.
We're not seeing what you're seeing.
Okay.
You're not sure, Jessica, why that would be. Let me just try it at the first row, just to make sure that it's
Because
not,
Chat GPT or whatever the heck.
it doesn't like to
Your
be.
cursor's not moving on the screen.
Yeah, nothing is moving on the screen. Let me unshare and try to reshare it one more time. And
Okay.
Well, I saw something there.
Is the robot shot?
Stop share and
He
reshare.
just wants to get paid.
Pay me.
I'm not doing it for free.
All right, well, so now I think that my cursor is now moving.
Yep.
No. Oh, yes, there we go. There we go. So I was just opening up the USGS groundwater presentation. And it's basically key findings, what I read out to you a moment ago. The baseline groundwater conditions, nitrogen and pharmaceutical correlation. Total nitrogen levels are correlated with pharmaceutical concentrations in certain areas, suggesting wastewater as a significant contributor to groundwater contamination. This is ChatGPT, not me. Some areas with elevated nitrogen but no pharmaceutical detections may be influenced by other land uses or atmospheric sources. So these are among the key findings.
8 years ago, this.
This is what was found 8 years ago in the 9 wells that we
Same thing.
sampled across the island. So yes, and there was even some specialized findings. This one's close to my heart because
Yeah.
Strawberry Lane is right
in your neighborhood.
It's like
Yeah.
100 feet down the road from
Yeah.
this particular well. Detected
Yikes.
PFH, XA, 9 nanograms per liter and bromacil, but no volatile organic compounds
Wow.
like 1,4-dioxane and MTBE. So it's giving you a pretty, so what I would, and one of the things that you can do is that you can take this triangle under key findings and recommendations and filter by condition and then say, text contains,
You can search for a word.
nitrogen,
Just that word. Yeah.
just that word, and it will boil down all the studies that talk about nitrogen.
Yeah.
All the ones that talk about PFAS. all the ones that talk about irrigation.
This is very good.
Can you drill down on fear mongering?
We can do that, by the way, in SharePoint. You
And-
can drill
and-
down through all the studies, just using their function.
Right, and just if you're starting to use this at all, so it looks like a filter, the icon for doing that, filter, what I did was filter by condition.
You know, if you could create a tutorial,
Use, how to use
that would
it,
be very
absolutely.
helpful, 'cause
And then up at
I'm
the
not-
top, there's a remove filter, and it gives you the whole list
And
back.
put you back to the
The
starting
whole
point.
list. So this allows us to pull up the relevant studies for what we
This
want,
is great.
right?
How
So,
many studies are there sampled?
so I've done like 11 or 12 so
The
far.
ones, the
12
major, the major
so
studies.
far.
That
And,
we pay for.
and yes, right. These are like the ones you hear again and again and again. It includes the 2005 Nelson Pope Voorhees study that we were looking at before, but it also includes like going all the way back to Sorensen and like all the basic studies of Shelter Island.
I'm just wondering if there's value to sorting them by date and
Yeah, well,
then
you can-
going through the
you can
key
do that.
findings
At
to
any
just
point, you
see,
can- you can
over
sort by-
time, what those key findings are bubbling to the
you could probably
surface.
filter it any way.
It's
you
right
want.
here, sort by, it's showing, yeah, sort by column A to Z. This is basically clicking here, A to Z would be from earliest to latest study. So that's now making it 1978. It's
Right.
already sorted by date, and then you can filter it down. So you can definitely, as we do this. So the only other thing is that, I don't want to say ChatGPT is perfect. We know it's not. So I think I've been reading through what ChatGPT has said. Most of these studies I've read at least once and sometimes 3 or 4 times. So I'm pretty happy with what I'm getting so far from ChatGPT, but I feel like I should be adding a column out to the right for us to comment on,
Whatever.
yeah, just
All right,
to,
can I ask a question?
yes.
It's a practical question, because I'm still not through the Voorhees report, and I did start it, and it's,
There's-
250 pages. So my question is it necessary for each one of us to go through all of these studies? I know we have a March 1st deadline, can we break this up somehow?
I think areas of interest and expertise, certain people are going to be more interested in irrigation issues, certain people are going to be more interested
I
in.
think the debugging of some of this can be really done by the users when they look at the data and come back to us and say, I'd like to see this, instead of us trying to pre-guess what they want to have. This is
I'm
a
not following,
board,
Ken.
this is something that it's a tool.
Right, this is a
This is
tool.
a tool, this is not there's no final end to this with regards to what you can do.
No, but we're supposed to sort of go through the information to find out what questions aren't being addressed.
That's correct. And in fact, I felt there was one that jumped
That's
out
an
at
interesting,
me.
we could search, that could be done. What's the question?
Well, yeah, there was a question that jumped out
Yeah.
at me, which was, how do the issues of potable water supply and wastewater interact? And this is a question really a lot about setbacks and, having all our wells and our septic
That's
systems
interesting. I don't
mixed
think
together.
anything has ever been
That's
done.
what jumped out at me as being like the salient issue. It seems like what we're always doing is wrestling with setbacks. Again, that was me looking at these studies and saying, well, what am I not getting out of this? But, so what I would suggest is at least to go through the key findings and recommendations that ChatGPT has given for each of these. That's a very short read. And what I would ask you to do actually is, rather than, let me go back to the folder. So here's our folder for studies. I just need to move your faces out of my way. I made a copy of what we've done so far, and I have the original that I'm working on. I'm going to work in the original. If you are online and you want to get in, if you can't get in, let me know and I'll figure out how to
Yeah, I think
grant
it
permissions.
says you need to have permission, yeah.
All right, I will send all of you permission to get into the copy.
When you do
Yes.
that, could you just
And I will
send it
keep
as a
copying
link
the
so that
copy.
we can click onto the link?
It will be a link.
Go right into it?
You can go right into this
Right into the
this
copy.
spreadsheet. And so I'll send you a copy. That way nobody can feel like they're going to damage it.
lost, yeah.
Right.
And play with it.
And to play with it. The other thing that you can do, by the way, is if you double click on it, you can download it.
Yeah.
And it works from your own computer just as well. As long as you're in our SharePoint, If you download it, you work on your own copy of it, it'll,
And you'll have it on your system.
right.
So this is a folder in,
It's in the top of our studies folder. Notice that I labeled it with a 0 at the beginning.
yeah,
The idea was to make it be the very top of the studies folder.
so it's just that, so it's in the studies folder.
It's currently
We're
in.
talking about in SharePoint,
Yes,
Yeah.
So you go
not our page, not our webpage.
Well, you can go to our webpage, then you go to.
Studies, you just key in studies at the top
Sure.
of the search.
But I mean, does our SharePoint have, I'll say the original that Ken put
Yes.
in 5 years ago, plus this, or is it all one thing now?
We don't, I don't know how.
I haven't taken, I've removed nothing. I've added one
So
spreadsheet,
whatever Ken had,
and everything that Ken
Still
had,
there.
I
Everything
took
is still there.
everything Ken
It's a
had and
separate-
translated it into
Okay,
this.
right.
all right,
So there should be identical information from what Ken did and from, because he didn't do a summary. The ChatGPT thing couldn't have existed then, right?
okay, good.
But, so yeah, so if you're in the town website, you go to.
This is the WAC
Yeah,
page.
yeah, it's committee member access.
Okay.
Just go to studies and you'll find, it looks like.
Because I
this
think,
very-
does everybody know SharePoint to get in?
So I
You
just,
all do?
all I did was
Looks like
hit
this.
committee member access and I was there.
I know.
So
Just
and
copy.
then you can scroll down to studies,
It's,
Okay,
click on studies,
This is the work.
and in the top of studies, 0
right.
is this, and you'll be opening it.
He's gonna
okay,
go
I see what you're saying, so it is in effect.
Yes.
And you,
Yes.
Yes.
or you can
I can request access.
request access.
You can send it to me.
If you
So I
just,
will send everybody permission to access this.
That's good, thank you.
All right, so we have the beginning, we really have this begun. And the other thing I would ask for from you, Meg, I'll get you in one second. The other thing I would just ask for from everybody is if there's a study that you feel should be in here, that is, right, let me know that there's an additional study we really ought to get ChatGPT to summarize for us and get a row in here and incorporate it.
yeah, if you go,
I had at least 2 studies that I think we should add to the list.
So
I'll send
Send them to me and I will
Oh,
incorporate
that'd
them
be
in this
great.
format so
Very
that.
large. But I'll send them over.
Great, great. So then we'll start to, and again, we're way ahead of the game here. We really have a jump on this now, so.
I might just put them directly into this folder. I'll just do a new folder that says Meg's add-ins, and then you can take them from there, put them.
Put them wherever.
yes,
And
However,
then put them in the main folder and delete mine when you're done with it, but just so they don't get lost in the mix,
that's great.
okay?
And also, if, it made sense for example, the USGS baseline study stuff was all in one folder. I didn't move it to the studies folder. I just linked right to it.
Yeah.
So this brings those things together, whatever folder they're in, if the organization is working.
organizationally, the way I put this in here over the years,
Yeah.
it could be used needs a lot of work really with regards to being able to categorize the various things that we've done. There's a lot of duplication, like the word center, I try to put, that are all things related to nitrates, I put in.
All right, and I just left so that
Yeah.
we were getting feedback, echo, so,
Yeah.
so we don't have the echo. All right, indexing of studies seems like
Thank you
good.
very much for doing that, Peter. Really great.
Yeah.
All right, so I put this next item on the agenda because it's very current and I think it's just worth our while taking a moment. The library is going through a process.
Yeah.
Some of that process is going well. There's some of that process is unknown what's going to happen with it. And its relevance to us is that Suffolk County Health Department has to approve their septic system. So I just was wondering if, Joe, if you could kind of let us know where, what's the issue? Why is there even a question about their septic system? What's going on there?
So I have to speak generally because I'm not totally tuned into the application or the design issues, but generally speaking, the library is seeking to expand their square footage. And as a result, their total flow, wastewater flow that's generated also increases. How you calculate that flow is established by code. It's an exercise that we had to go through when we were examining the municipal wastewater system here in the center. Your building type, your occupancy, your use dictate how many gallons per square foot or gallons per seat. If you're a restaurant, you generate. So that exercise for the library revealed that they had too many gallons per for their site ultimately, then the site would allow. So there's the flow that's generated, and then there's on the code side, and then also on the code side, there's how much flow your property size can take. And that's the density issue that the health department regulates heavily. It's to prevent too many gallons of wastewater going into too small of a parcel. And so they're ultimately the calculation for their flow is what's being discussed now. Whether you use some rooms for congregation or meeting or office space has an impact on how many gallons you end up coming out of that calculation with. And ultimately, this is an issue because their parcel is too small for what they originally calculated would be the flow for their new facility. Now, part of that conversation is where you source your water from. So
in other words, the size of the parcel versus flow is driven by the setback to your well?
no, those calculations are done independently.
Okay.
How much flow you generate is a code calculation, but it's based off of
Just the size of the parcel.
size of the facilities and what their type is. That's how you calculate how much flow you make. And
For
then,
example, they have a meeting room with 100 people capacity. What the health department is, it generates the flow rate on that number, that there could potentially be 100 people in that meeting room.
right.
So-
I mean, a meeting room has a flow associated with it. It's
Yes.
gallons per person that's
Exactly.
in the meeting room, or gallons per square foot of the meeting room. Right. So,
Even though there might only be 20 people in there.
sure, right, because the wastewater system has to accommodate the worst case scenario when everybody's at the meeting space. So yeah, backing up in concept, how you design these systems and how it's permitted. You have your facility, you work your flow based on how, the details of the facility, how many square feet it is, and, you work through the code to determine what's unique to that location. Then there's that overarching number of the total amount of flow you can have, given the parcel size. In our case, it's the parcel size, but the county has different watershed zones. So depending on what your watershed zone is, or your water management zone, that can change the density, but it's all the same zone for us. So it doesn't matter if you're in the center or the peninsula areas, we're all in the same management zone. And that management zone dictates how many gallons per acre you're allowed to contribute to the groundwater. So that number is effectively fixed. The only way you can change that number is if you are sourcing your water off the parcel or on the parcel. So if you are a community water supply, you have a higher tolerance for how much you can put in the ground. If you are on-site well, whether it's considered a public system or not, if the water is sourced on that parcel, you have a lower amount of wastewater that
So
you're.
it's not really setback distances, but in fact it is that you're.
Eventually, the setback, so that's the next layer of design, okay? It's making sure that you have enough space for the flow that you're going to generate. Okay, so let's say you pass that. Then you go to the other code-related aspects of separation distance. So just because I can fit that on my parcel can take 1,000 gallons per day. The geometry of the parcel and the adjacent parcels have to allow for the arrangement of my septic and well, because I might be able to make it fit on my parcel, but my well might still be too close to my neighbor's septic or my neighbor's well. So there's the geometry of the site-specific layout afterward, but that's typically dealt with after you pass the first checkpoint. Does my building generate too much flow for the parcel size anyway? Well, then it doesn't matter because I can't advance to the next step. But those are all of the moving parts to how you size and site these systems, and that's what they're seeking approval from.
And just as reading the paper from Thursday, I know that they're in the process.
They're in the.
Unknown what will happen with that. And would there be an issue if they were sourcing water from off the parcel? Would they have would there be a problem with their application?
With where their flow is now, no. If there was a community water system, they would not be in this outside of tolerance, but because their water is sourced.
They have a well
They
under
are-
the building.
They're over. Now, you can certainly conceive a circumstance where you generate so much flow that you're over whether you have community water or well, that doesn't matter. But in this particular instance,
It's in between.
It's in between
It would be okay if they did source their water on site.
with the current design. Yeah.
Okay?
A question. One of my concerns always is for nearshore areas, basically storm surges and having a source for emergency water for people who want to bring their jugs and have them filled up someplace
Yes.
in town that has good water to drink. What kind of a stress would that put on a situation like this? If an outside faucet at the library could be used for emergency water?
What do you mean stress?
They couldn't do it. They'd have to.
For volumes, in other words, you're bringing a 5-gallon jug, you fill it up, that's a lot different than going and flushing the toilet, maybe, or using it to wash your hands. And if it were a serious situation where we had maybe 20 or so people that were needing emergency water during the storm surge, or a month thereafter, find a place for this water to be sourced in town.
I'm
That's a
not
whole
sure.
nother.
I think it is another discussion.
It is another
However,
discussion.
I think it is, from discussing, I think that there are a couple of angles to come at this with. I want to just underline the point that you're trying to make is that an emergency source of potable water would be something, is another factor in the overall consideration of what we're doing with water supply.
Planning.
And I know that, you and I have had some conversation about the possibility that West Neck could become
Yeah,
a.
this is really
source.
near shore area type of that situation that I think.
An emergency.
Or contamination of a local well due to something that we don't know about in the center.
Well, and what we saw when the Heights was down, was not, they was telling people to get bottled water. What we
Yeah.
were seeing was that it runs on the IGA and you
Yeah,
couldn't get bottled water for periods, 2 different periods of time I was aware of, because I regularly shop. So,
You have to, you'd really have to go to the Department of Health to set up any kind of distribution system with the public.
mhm.
It's not like it would be 50 years ago, you go to your neighbors. Your neighbor says, okay, everybody on, Smith Street, come to my house and get water. It's just it's a different environment, legally.
Well, it's like sharing water that we have on a lot or 2 lots adjacent to one another that neither have water. You can go somewhere on town property and put a well in, and for 2, but if you go to 3, all of a
Right,
sudden.
but it's regulated.
Well, we're mostly there. These town buildings are considered public water supplies, so they are monitored and regulated such that it's the water that comes out of every faucet is of drinking water quality. However, the gray area is, when is it okay for somebody to come and fill up 10 gallons and take it home? That's something that I don't know.
And that has to do with capacity.
Well,
The well
you can carry
capacity.
10 gallons, be sure to carry 5.
I think it's more about the storage, bringing your container, how do you ensure that the container is sanitized, and how long does that person keep that's where you run into issues. But the water that comes out of the faucet of our town buildings is already approved for public use.
If it's accessible, if there's no outside faucet.
Oh, right, yeah, well, we're not set up for
And it's
it, yeah.
thinking of an emergency situation.
Exactly.
People
Yeah, yeah.
don't have water.
Yeah.
All right, so again, I think it's something that needs to stay
Somewhere
on
along
the
the
table
way.
and need to be part of considerations. I wanted to move along, if I can, I mean, we have a report back on, we kind of understand where the library is at with what they're, and we're waiting to see what the county says, this county health department says to them. I asked for feedback from the town board, you all saw it, on the idea that they're asking us to develop an RFP. What was it that they really want the RFP on? What would be, not surprisingly, we haven't heard back. I don't think that it's really been taken up. Things are, things are shifting on the town board. We have a new town board member. Everybody needs to be. in reviewing what we've been discussing, I felt that precisely what we had advised already, what we had voted on advising the town board was to look at the alternatives for potable water, specifically in the center. I would like to suggest that we may want to take a more holistic approach. The town is in a situation of needing to deal with its septic systems under its municipal buildings and with the filtration of water or sourcing of water to its buildings. And we're again in that situation where we have just a mix of wells and septic systems all together and a very, very complicated knot of setbacks, making things harder. I would like to suggest to the committee that we suggest to the town board a holistic approach, a study for the municipal center only of both wastewater and filtration or water sourcing as giving the town a professional study, a professional look at what are the options as they go through the process of thinking about reconfiguring the center.
This hasn't been done? I mean, the analysis of the municipal buildings and.
And both waste and well water.
There has not been a formal study done of the municipal buildings and how to do that, how to configure that. That is correct,
You know,
right?
we have.
For water supply.
Yes.
Well,
Both water
supply
inflow
and
and
waste-
outflow.
It's the interaction of the two is where I'm beginning to feel like we're missing the.
Well,
We tried to create a wastewater system in the center. Okay, that was, the community did not want to move wastewater from the town center outward anywhere. So we're stuck with our wastewater treatment here in the center.
that study identifies part of the reasoning and the analysis for seeking a centralized system for these parcels, whether it's here on one parcel or down the street, that didn't matter, but the concept of centralized treatment evolved out of the conflict of small parcels and
Setbacks between wells and
septic. So in that sense, that analysis was part of the wastewater project, but it did not seek to resolve the water supply component of that. That was considered, a separate scope
All
of work,
septic.
but it did drive.
It drove what you could do with wastewater.
Yes, I mean, it went so far as to even identify the number of variances and conflicts that there were on a parcel by parcel basis in seeking a new wastewater system on site.
Right. So again, what I'm moving toward is, correct me if I'm wrong, but the town is under some requirement now to address either filtration of its water or,
Yes, there are improvements that are mandated to our non-community well status, unrelated to wastewater issues. These are just sort of plain Jane code requirements that are of significant expense. So if there was a time.
Something has to be done with the wells and with and we know that something needs to be done with septic systems. My personal preference would be something that goes beyond just nitrogen, but.
The mandate, though, is not, it has no influence on our wastewater infrastructure or type of treatment. It's simply on the water supply equipment. But that we don't have any analysis to that considers both of those things, specifically and how to make a decision on.
So for example, you'd have a lot more freedom to do different things if you didn't have all these setbacks from various wells.
Oh, absolutely, yeah,
Right.
yeah.
So that.
Either of those. Either of them.
direction, you would have a lot more freedom to do things.
Yes.
If you reconfigure it such that, so you could centralize your well subsystem and centralize your waste system and put them at far ends of the, you know, pie in the sky, I'm not the consultant, but put them at far ends of the entire municipal complex.
Or centralize one so that you didn't have to centralize the other, yeah.
Right, so you could, my feeling is that that interaction, the wells and the septic systems in the municipal center should be the thing that gets studied.
Hasn't the town board mulled this over?
Which,
Just the whole idea of what Peter's talking about. In other words, Peter, you're jumping ahead saying, hey,
It hasn't been done, is what I'm saying.
we'll do it, you know, we recommend you do a study for this, but has there been any discussion at the town
What's
board?
gonna be there?
Beg pardon?
Like, what's even gonna be in what they call the town municipal complex?
I see, yeah, so,
I mean,
In other words,
that's a question.
the town has questions to take on that go beyond water advisory committee topics. They need to have enough office space, there are things they need to do, that not have secretaries in fireplaces and things like, you know, things like that.
and those inadvertently lead to the hamstring of septic and well issues. All of our sites effectively are septic constrained, either because there's a well on site or because you're over capacity, you're pre-existing over capacity. So any discussion about, you know, more office space ultimately translates into that problem coming to the forefront.
And when what was the study, who did the study that looked at all of this before and came up with the conclusion of
Just septic.
centralized
That was
process?
just a wastewater study from 2 years ago about updating our septic program here, or septic systems for town parcels. That's,
It drew out all the circles of what the setbacks were and where the overlaps were and where you were,
Who did that study?
Yeah,
Lombardo Associates.
the scope of that included the analysis and then a recommendation for, you know, what type of infrastructure best suits those needs. So it
and
could,
all that analysis and information is still, the town's paying for that, right?
You still have.
Yeah, yeah.
The town has it.
Yeah.
Again, what I'm saying is that should be brought together with the supply issue.
Analysis.
Configuration. What would be the best option in terms of how to configure, you know, least expensively, how to configure all these buildings with, you know, if we had one water system for the center somewhere in the municipal complex or outside of it, then the filtration presumably would have to be just on that one system.
right, I mean, I would.
Each building has its own well, its separate filtration system.
I would just go, I guess, maybe one step further, and you already sort of know the answer to this question, is one, you can't conceivably update all of these systems on individual parcels as they are. Something has to change. You'll never meet all of the code requirements. You either have to seek a list of variances to achieve those, or you have to get rid of one or the other and centralize it off parcel. Doesn't have to be.
Do you unitize the parcels?
What's that?
Unitize the parcels?
You mean merge all of the
Yeah.
parcels? Some of them are across the street. You know, certainly there's these two parcels, but the Legion, you know, can't be merged, and the police
Mike's got a,
department and the Justice Hall are across the street.
What's Joe saying, it is complicated to merge the parcels because we have so many different structures on them, even with one owner. It'll depend on the county, there's also a paper road. But I feel like the study that you're talking about, Peter, is actually part of a larger study of the municipal buildings. So we need to start with a full needs assessment of all the buildings, their current status, and then what we anticipate the needs of the town being in the future. And then we have to figure out exactly what's the best way to move forward to accommodate all that. And is it renovating the buildings we have? Is it starting fresh? Like, what are the options? And then once you know that, you have to figure out how you're gonna treat the water and wastewater in those buildings.
So it may be a part of a larger process.
and it's out of our purview.
Well, parts of the process are out of.
Right now, it's out of our purview.
I feel like if it's gonna be a much bigger study, it would be after.
Yes, much bigger.
All right, well, so again, we're open, we were tasked with,
Yeah.
with developing an RFP. We then asked, what would be the criteria for this RFP? What would be a budget for it? We suggested doing the center first and then the nearshore area second. I think we still suggest all of those things. I would like to say, but it should be looked at holistically, both sides of this yin yang equation, wells and septics. And obviously, the town has a larger set of considerations that it has to go through. You also have to think about, is there going to be affordable housing in the center? Will there be any changing to B1 zoning? Any of those things, all outside of our purview, but related to water issues.
It's a big
So
part of
the
it.
piece of it, the big part of it is the water, right? And it could also relate to the idea of an emergency supply system.
It's a big part
An
of it.
emergency
Affordable
pumping system.
housing.
Yeah, Andrew.
I'm worried about this problem just becoming so complicated and having so many different permutations and dimensions that we don't get anywhere.
Well, I appreciated that we're not going to get anything done today. Again, we have previously put in a request to the town board to refine the idea of an RFP for just water supply.
So what I've written a one sentence scope: evaluation of the water and wastewater supply and treatment alternatives in the town's center triangle,
Yeah.
and specifically including different configurations of water and wastewater systems for the municipal buildings as a group.
Okay.
I mean, I'm just trying to,
Right, well, and you're also I was narrowing my focus to the municipal center, and you are remaining in focused on the center triangle, which I appreciate.
I'm concerned that if we recommend an RFP,
Mhm,
which is a complicated undertaking in and of itself,
mhm,
and we try to connect that to a comprehensive plan for these municipal buildings,
mhm,
the people who are in the center triangle, who are drinking water,
mhm. I
which exceeds the
yeah.
MCLs in some instances, are going to be doing so for years if we go down that road. And that, to me, is unacceptable for them to wait for a recommendation for how to deal with their individual problems. So
Do you want to read it out again, your statement that you wrote out?
well, what you seem to be talking about is an evaluation of the water and wastewater supply and treatment options for the center triangle, and specifically including configurations of water and wastewater systems for the municipal buildings, I would say individually and as a group, and/or as a group.
And/or,
Whatever.
Mhm,
So that's fine.
mhm. For you, from your point of view, that's a
That's
reasonable recommendation from us as to the first phase of a potential study.
My concern is, though, that if that work actually has to wait for decisions by the town about how to optimally use this real estate,
Mhm.
I think that's just going to take an awful long time. And it's going to take an unacceptably long time for the people in the center triangle who we have reason to believe whose drinking water is compromised.
Well, nothing is more compromised than the center itself, than the center triangle.
Right.
Right in the center.
So if that's what we want to do, that's okay. But I would like to also then provide those individuals who are so interested with a set of recommendations as to how they can deal with their own individual water issues if they've got them.
I think that we have talked about having some kind of funding, if necessary, setting up a threshold to help these people purchase RO systems. We know that that's not the be-all and the end-all, but it is an immediate ability for those people's water to improve. rather than wait for
While,
deliberating on whether we get municipal water or not to these people, because that will in and of itself take a long, long time. So I thought that the discussion was, how can, well, it's not what I thought, but the discussion is, how can we help those people finance RO systems if they can't do it? Because there are people who are on restricted incomes in this area. For people in outlying areas who don't have problems with their water and they have RO systems, they say they pay $200 to $2,000, that's fine. But for the people who don't have the wherewithal to do that, how can we assist them both in terms of letting them know that that's an option, and then letting them know that there's funding available if they need it? I'm just gonna put that out there, because I think that's,
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. At the same time, people who don't have the money to do it, you're talking $200 for Home Depot to get a counter under the sink kind of system, which gives them pure water, and the cost of a plumber to put it in. And then there's a yearly maintenance cost to change the filters. That amount of money is probably measured in, at the most, in maybe a couple $1,000, or maybe even less than that. Whatever, I don't know what plumbing costs.
so are you suggesting that people can afford that?
I'm suggesting $200 and a handy person can do it.
Well, I'm a widow, and I don't have a handy person around.
I'll tell you.
I have to hire a plumber.
and I don't, I mean, again.
It's not like it's like $1,000. I mean, if you're going to talk about, to me, to put one of these systems in under your sink, unless you're gonna rebuild the
Yeah,
kitchen.
It's way off topic. I mean.
It is
the
off topic,
yeah,
but
yeah.
it's my answer to
Yeah, it's.
Andrew's deliberation about, or his,
Here's why it's not off topic.
It's not okay. Okay, it is not, oh, good.
I think it's
I'm glad it's on topic.
I think it's on topic.
Right.
It's what we're trying to.
Because
suggest to propose
A
study.
year ago, we did a set of studies around nitrates in well water in the center.
Right.
And we have yet to come up with a set of recommendations for the people who were whose wells were subject to that study. And our process that process document that has just been endorsed by the board says that's what we're supposed to do. So instead of actually working towards that, we're now getting into a big study of what's going on in the center, water and wastewater, and then what are we doing with these town buildings, which then implies or requires a study of the necessary uses of those buildings, which it's reasonable to expect to trigger a community-wide discussion of all of that. And that takes time, and that's more time that the people in the center who are experiencing drinking water quality issues aren't getting their issues dealt with. And that, to me, is not acceptable. It's just taking too long. It's already taken too long. So it is relevant. If what we want to do is go down that road of a large study like that, that's okay with me, as long as we give the people who are facing water quality issues a set of recommendations and potentially the financial support to actually deal with their issues while this larger work is underway. So but no, it's not acceptable to me to ask them to wait.
And then we're asking them to wait for,
The community to decide
What
what the future is of all this municipal real estate, what the optimal water and wastewater configuration is with regard to all this real estate and the broader town center. That could take years to work out.
maybe decades.
Maybe
Yeah, that's too long for me.
so my response, and I think it's for the immediate RO systems for these people. That's why can't we make that a recommendation?
I'm okay, we just need to discuss it and decide it.
And how to go to the people that we know have those high
Just-
nitrates.
The reason I'm reacting this way is we haven't done that yet,
So let's talk about
okay?
it.
That's,
It is a separate discussion, so it's not, again, the one is a discussion of making a recommendation, the other is a discussion of,
Implementation.
well, no, what we were tasked with, which was an
Oh.
RFP for a study, so that it's not just us making the recommendation.
I think there's two different things, though. We're being asked, from what I understand, the RFP was really for, we're looking through all of these studies that you've indexed, right? To find out what information do we have, what information more do we need in order to have a comprehensive plan for the town, municipal area, and for the center at large. I mean, it seems to me that that has been the sequence, is we know we have and that's separate from what we know is a problem already,
Right,
which
they're
are the
two
results of
different-
the test. So it's like we're talking two different things.
Yes.
We're looking for the recommendation for someone a professional to come in and do a water plan. Well, we're saying, okay, but we have all this information, so let's go through it and find out what we have, so we can come back to the town board and make recommendations. All right, when you're looking for a professional to make a water plan, this is what we have, this is what we know already, but these are the things we don't know, so maybe that professional can focus there. And so in my head, there are two different things that we're talking about
There are
here. They're
two- there seem to
related,
be two
but they are
different
two
things.
different issues.
but let's not sequence them.
No, and that's what you're saying, they're not, they shouldn't be
I get that,
sequenced.
so again, Greg is right, it's not quite on topic. That it's relevant to our mission, and yes, it's relevant to the mission statement and saying that we should get to a recommendation. However, the agenda item is what needs to be studied. We were asked to work on an RFP for a study of how to address water supply in the center area, or in general, right? So we don't have to get to a conclusion about that. We can table it for future discussion. We can add a new agenda item for
I'm
discussing a
fine
recommendation for
the
this.
RFP. I just don't want to see the people in this area
Mhm.
who are adversely affected.
Which is why-
This area
which is
have to
why-
wait for the conclusion of all that.
Right, to get a recommendation.
right.
Okay, so again, separating those two, this is why I was focusing on a much narrower subject, which was the municipal center and the interaction of its wells and wastewater systems. My suggestion is not to address, not for the purpose of addressing what you're asking about, which is a recommendation for everybody in the center triangle who has readings that are approaching 10 milligrams of nitrogen, like myself. So those are two separate agenda items. I still think that we should be turning back to the town board and saying, you need to study your wells and your septic systems in a holistic way.
But can I agree with Andrew?
Don't think we do
That
that.
that we need to,
We don't
Not to
this
wait.
needs to be addressed
Without waiting, I agree that
without
it's,
waiting,
but one
because
thing
it
doesn't
has
stop
been a
behind
year,
the
and
other.
if we don't follow up on it, then we're just doing the same thing that, we spend thousands of dollars on studies, put them on a shelf, and nothing gets done.
Right, so
So
I'm,
I don't
I'm
wanna
more
be
than,
part of
I'm
that.
more than
Yeah.
happy to add an agenda item to our next meeting. That's, do we make a recommendation that people acquire reverse osmosis filtration systems? Have that discussion. I'm more than happy to have that discussion in our next meeting. I'm wanting to conclude, what is this RFP we're recommending that the town undertake?
Yeah, we have to hear from them. They have to tell us. They have to give us the marching orders.
Okay, all right, so let's
All
take.
right, Amber's got a.
Yeah, Amber.
hand
So
up.
I've been sitting here listening, when I first read this, number 8,
Mhm.
the RFP for center septic / well reconfiguration options, I'm thinking like, where did this come from? Like, this is unfamiliar to me. But as I'm listening to the conversation, I think Lisa started to touch upon it. The RFP had more to do with the indexing.
Mhm.
Item
Yes, it
number
did.
6 that's what, I believe the town.
What is
board-
missing?
you know, we need to check in with the rest of them, but that's what, like, what do we have as our body of knowledge, what's missing?
Mhm.
What do we need? That's the RFP that I am aware of. So.
In other words, zero in on what's missing and then
Then make
make an RFP for that.
Make a recommendation saying.
And this is where I was working on the indexing and I was saying, we don't have these two things brought together.
Yes.
So, which is why I'm suggesting, it doesn't have to be a conversation that we conclude today, but I am suggesting that through the municipal center, what needs to be studied is these two things together. I also think we needed to respect what Andrew's saying, which is that it's too long for the people in the town center to wait for a recommendation from us. So, at 10 to 4, my thought is we make that, we've taken on new business.
It's a separate
which is
to-do.
to make a recommendation. We just got our mission statement approved saying that's what we should be doing next. Yeah, Andrew.
The concern about narrowing this RFP to just the municipal buildings is that we will not, for the center, the broader center triangle, evaluate the different water supply options through this work. And
Right.
I, for one, would recommend that we include the center triangle and do that work. And if we want to connect it to the town's plan for the municipal buildings, that's going to take a while. But in the interim, we recommend that people put in point of use RO systems. That would be my preference.
Okay.
So that the RFP would be larger. It would have a larger geographic scope rather than just these
I understand that you're trying to
buildings.
keep the people who we've
Yeah.
established, half of them have actionable.
Right, because the work I did this summer concluded that actually the costs are pretty similar. Okay? A community water system owned by the Suffolk County Water Authority because of the substantial capital and operating subsidies they provide is more expensive than having individual treatment, but not a lot more expensive.
Yes.
I was surprised by that, but that's where it shook out.
Yeah, I think it's important to
And-
point out, Andrew, excuse me for interrupting, but there's a real misconception that you were not approaching that process intellectually honest. And I believe you were. And I think that you need to reiterate that you didn't go through that process with a particular outcome in mind. You just followed the data.
That's right, I followed the data, and I'm aware of the concerns about the quality of that work. And there is a 6-page memo, which is not the slide presentation. There's a 6-page memo in text and accompanying calculations that are posted on our website that address that issue about the quality of that analytical work. And I stand by it.
However.
And let me just finish, sorry, because I put a lot of time into this.
Go for it.
The reason that those numbers are as close as they are the operating and capital subsidies available from the Suffolk County Water Authority if they own the assets. If the town of Shelter Island wanted to do it on its own, it would be
Different story.
wildly more expensive to do it.
Yep.
If the town of Shelter Island says it doesn't want the Suffolk County Water Authority to own these assets, it would be wildly more expensive. But once you let the Suffolk County Water Authority own the assets, the costs of those options really narrow. The implementation time, however, is vastly different. We could make a recommendation to the individuals who are concerned in and around the center triangle to put in under the kitchen sink point of use RO systems, and that could be done very quickly and very inexpensively. My concern is that as we approach this issue, we look at it comprehensively enough to look at the alternatives for the center, but not so big as to just bog us down in all kinds of different facts. So my recommendation would be that this RFP that we're considering, consider water and wastewater alternatives in the center triangle with a particular focus on the municipal buildings. And while that work is getting done, because it's inevitably going to be connected with the community's desire for how to use the buildings here, while that work is getting done, we recommend to the people in the center triangle who are so inclined to install point of use systems. And fine, let's say they have them for 5 years.
Right.
And then they get rid of them.
And your concern is that you don't know that at $200 would grant
Plus labor. Yeah, right.
Your concern is that you're not, in terms of what you're achieving, you're not achieving the same thing as what the standard that you were trying to reach.
No, but it may be an acceptable standard for the people who are here.
Yeah.
Well, and I have
Might be
to,
just fine for them.
I have to argue that some of the information that came out in the meeting that we had it's legitimate, in that if you have public water supply or community water, they don't treat under the
That's right.
MCL of 10 milligrams per liter. I think that's what it is for nitrates. So
That's correct.
that's not going to take care of the problem for those people who are in that actionable level. So an RO system will. So we have to acknowledge that reality. And,
Yep.
and so, you know, there's a lot of other things that municipal water will take care of that ROs maybe don't, but still, it's not only a good stopgap measure, but it could be a good measure long-term until the community water supply systems address nitrates more granularly, or, you know, reduce the MCL. So,
Everything
yes,
else.
I think that we need to really, that's what the public said, and I think that we need to pay attention to that information.
So, okay, so again, you were tying the two together. You're saying we recommend an RFP that for the waste and well water for the entire center triangle, and at the same time make a recommendation that individuals put in our.
I would want
That's
to,
not,
I would want
that's
to
not what the
test.
town board has asked, correct?
No, they have not, this is.
They haven't asked for that.
The
No.
recommendation.
So we just have to make sure that we,
The one thing that they did, the one thing they
They-
did do is approve our mission statement around around potable water, not public water. And our mission statement says we come to a recommendation.
There's one caveat in what you're saying. I think we need to have a discussion about the technical merits, plus and pro and con, of point of use RO systems before we zero in on that recommendation. We haven't had that discussion. I'd like to know Joe's opinion from a technical standpoint as to whether that's a good thing to recommend. We haven't had that discussion.
Okay, so again, at 4 o'clock, we can't go much further. First item on the agenda for our next session. Good. All right, I'd like to just touch upon real quickly, Nearshore Peninsula Testing Program. We're getting our legal boilerplate necessary. We're gonna have it up on the website at some point in the near future. Any idea of timing on this?
No.
Okay. We'd like to allow people to the opportunity to, I put in from that, after we did our testing in the center triangle, I called Suffolk County Health Department in. They came very quickly, within 2 weeks, tested my water. I'm still waiting for my results. So we'd like to not linger too much longer on getting that peninsular testing program going, especially since we're gonna have to take on the whole process that the mission statement suggests, getting ourselves to a recommendation, whatever it is we find from the Suffolk County Health Department tests of the peninsula area. So to that end, I would just like, and we'll come back to it in our next meeting, but I'd like you to just mention what we found from the building department.
Yeah, okay. So I talked to Mary Ellen McGahey, who's in the last couple of months, we were talking about irrigation and the problems with, that the building department, you know, because they're the first point of people's connection with irrigation law. And so the intern there, she put together a brief about some of the issues, and it's you have it all. So rather than going through it right now, we have no time, I would like to ask you, and this is unedited. because I said very
This is from
briefly,
the
can you
intern.
summarize what you're looking at? And so she said, yes, it's not edited, but I'm gonna give you an overview. Read this. So,
This is the building department's
Policy
concerns
brief.
about irrigation
Yes.
policy. And they're going to be presenting to the town board on this
Right.
topic. Do we have a time when they're intending to present to you?
no, they have to do this brief first.
Okay,
Yeah, we don't have them on the calendar yet.
okay,
No.
they're not on the calendar yet.
So we're,
We should
we're,
be
saying-
aware that as we move back to irrigation policy, which is going to, obviously be very relevant when we're talking about, do people have saltwater intrusion in near shore?
well, the reason that I asked about this
Mhm.
is because you have an irrigation subcommittee.
Mhm.
So
We'll
my
come back to
thought
them.
was, if we got from the building department some of the issues, that will help the committee determine, just look at the picture and say, well, where are the problems? And then discuss those issues. I mean, so this is sort of, this is where we have the problems. So it's really for the committee.
Yeah, really. yeah.
And again, I was called away on death in the family for the last few weeks. I'm now back for a couple of weeks, but I was hoping to get a meeting with the irrigation committee at the end of the year. We're into the holiday season here. Right at the beginning of the new year, we'll be doing it. And so this is of meaningful guidance for the irrigation subcommittee as
But
well
I
as the
would like-
building department's problems.
I would like to make it very clear that Mary Ellen said, we don't have, this is still a work in progress, and this is going to the town board. So really, we're just having sort of this is a window into the conversation, but it isn't up to us. It's for the town, it's between the building department and the town board.
Right.
But we can still read it and say, oh, okay, so what can we talk about?
The concerns
as a
about
committee.
irrigation. Right. All right.
Yes?
So we've gotten through the agenda somehow by 4:05. Are there any items that, old items or new items that just needed to be at least mentioned? Otherwise, we can have a motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion of that.
I second.
Yeah.